Tired of dropping your phone or struggling to prop it up? Meet the PopSockets phone grip with expanding kickstand in black, your new must-have accessory. Don't miss out. Grab yours today. Click the link in the video description to shop now on Amazon.
Germanwings mountain crash may not have been caused by suicidal pilot. Investigator reveals 10 years on from disaster. It was the plane crash that shocked the world. Germanwings co-pilot Andreas Lubitz flew an Airbus A320 into the French Alps, killing all 150 souls on board in a gruesome suicide murder plot. It's nearly 10 years to the day since the mass tragedy, but Andreas' grieving family have cast doubt on whether their son was really responsible for the deaths of the 149 passengers on board that day. The Lubitz family hired aviation expert Tim Van Beveren to scour reports for any crucial detail that may prove their son's guilt or innocence. Here, Tim exclusively reveals never-before-heard details about the case and recent conversations he shared with the Lubitz family. At 10:04 a.m. on 24 March 2015, air traffic control were alerted that the plane, following a routine flight path from Barcelona to Dusseldorf, had begun descending at a rapid pace and lost radio contact. It nosedived near the remote village of Pradzhot-Blayon at 400 mph, killing everyone on board, including the young co-pilot, 27-year-old Andreas Lubitz. Rescuers faced remote and treacherous terrain, but when they reached the scene of devastation, it was clear that no one could have survived such a violent impact. We had to live with the fact that he was portrayed as a mass murderer in the media. We are searching for the truth. The biggest piece of debris from the horror crash was no bigger than the size of a small car. The plane's mangled black box, a data recorder that provides vital clues to air crash investigators about the jet's final moments, was found amongst the wreckage. On it, they would find chilling cockpit audio, including pleas from the captain to open the damn door, and horrific screams from passengers. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, France's Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, B, delved into the cause of the crash. They concluded that the flight had been deliberately crashed into the side of the Tête du Traverse Peak by the plane's co-pilot in a murder-suicide plot. The chilling 2016 report suggested that Lubitz was able to override the cockpit door's keypad system when the captain left, taking control of the aircraft and sending the jet into a death plunge. It also stated that the young co-pilot had a history of mental health problems and had not made his employers aware of a doctor's note that meant he was unfit to work. It concluded that the collision with the ground was due to the deliberate and planned action of the co-pilot, who decided to commit suicide while alone in the cockpit. The family has remained silent since a press conference in 2017, where Tim presented his findings alongside Andreas' father Gunter, then 64. At the time, Gunter said, "In the 6 years before the crash, we saw our son as a life-affirming and cheerful person. At the time of the crash, our son was not suicidal. We had to live with the fact that he was portrayed as a mass murderer in the media. We are searching for the truth." He explained that in 2009, 6 years before the crash, his son had suffered from depression, but that he'd overcome illness and was full of life. Speaking exclusively to the son, Tim says, "It was certainly too much of a psychological burden for the family to work through the complete investigation files. With 39 volumes, 16,086 individual pages, and around 2,000 pages of press articles in various languages, and, in particular, trying to understand the technical background. I remember meeting with the family in Berlin on July 2016 very well. My main concern was that I was able to carry out my task with an open mind and that we were in agreement about this. So I asked the co-pilot's father, what if I find out during my research that the co-pilot deliberately flew the plane into the mountain? Gunter Lubitz replied that it would certainly be hard for the family, but they would be able to deal and live with this realization, and I would then also have to provide the relevant and reliable evidence. So that was the basis of my assignment. And it was precisely this reliable evidence and proof of a crash actively and deliberately brought about by the co-pilot that I was unable to establish in the investigation files available to me. On the day the tragedy unfolded, Tim says the family were whisked away from their home and remained under police observation for days without access to TV, radio, or newspapers. But as the story behind the crash unraveled, Tim began scouring through the report in search of answers, eventually releasing his own findings on the case. I asked the co-pilot's father, "What if I find out during my research that the co-pilot deliberately flew the plane into the mountain?" Tim claims that the crash probe was flawed from the start when investigators solely focused on Andreas' mental health and failed to follow other leads. He believes that the co-pilot's health was misinterpreted, that his actual doctor's note had ended 2 days before the crash, and that there was no input by medical professionals in the report. But one of his most shocking claims is that Andreas could have been exposed to toxic fumes after flying several planes with a history of air cabin contamination. Some of the symptoms of an aircraft fume event include depression, mood changes, and in extreme cases unconsciousness, as well as blurred vision, something that the co-pilot had reportedly struggled with. He told The Sun, "For the family and close friends I did talk to, this attribution of blame does not fit with the co-pilot's personality. I would like to emphasize that nobody here is categorically ruling out the suggested sequence of events of the accident, but there are considerable and, in my opinion, legitimate doubts." His report also raises technical concerns about the plane, suggesting that an onboard fault in the flight control unit could have caused the rapid nosedive. He says that there were 2 conflicting autopilot settings active as the plane descended something that is deemed technically impossible. An upcoming Sky documentary with various experts is also set to raise questions about technical issues that could have sparked the crash. Tim adds, "The family told me that they had concluded that in all the ongoing proceedings at the time, there was no longer any open investigation in all directions, as was required. From this point onwards, the investigation was actually only one-sided against the co-pilot, and everything else was simply disregarded." Asked if the family believed their son had carried out the murder-suicide pilot, Tim explains, "From my conversations, I know that the family does not deny this possibility across the board. Their problem is still that the accusations are not substantiated, but are based on assumptions." Having been so deeply involved in the shocking case, Tim says that the relatives of all those on board deserve a fresh investigation and have the right to know the truth. He adds, "This is not only a moral obligation, but also has to do with the respect we all owe for the deceased." At the time of the 2017 press conference, Dusseldorf prosecutor Christoph Kumpe said he saw no reason for the prosecution to reopen its investigation. He said, "The crash happened due to the deliberate actions of the co-pilot, likely with suicidal intent. There is not sufficient actual evidence of any other cause of the crash, and none is foreseeable." Prosecutor Christoph Kumpe said in an interview in February this year that Tim's report had never been handed over to his office, despite the family's claims in 2017 that it would be made available to authorities. However, the report has been available online since then, and Tim's say it was handed over the International Civil Aviation Organization and the German Ministry of Transport. In the interview, he said, "There is absolutely no doubt that the co-pilot is responsible for the crash. There is no sufficient factual evidence that there was any other cause of the crash." As the 10th anniversary approaches, it remains to be seen whether the case will ever be reopened despite concerns in the family's report.